So we'll allow that. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get started. So today we're embarking on a journey of self-discovery, exploring the profound question, I found her, and what does that really mean? I will be sharing some of my story along the way as we go on this journey to excavate and declutter our own adoption stories so that we can learn ways to reorganize our attachment to ourself. We will be drawing from insights from the attachment theory, the 7 core issues in adoption, and the transformative power of love maps, pulled from the perspective of Dr. John Gottman. Towards the end of the presentation, you'll uncover practical steps to rewrite your personal narrative and build a fulfilling sense of self. As we move through our time together, my hope is for us to be able to pause and connect as a group, and then hopefully be able to have some time to place in breakout rooms so that you can have a little bit more time with others. And then at the end of this workshop, we will also have time to share and write in the chats what come up for us as possible details to our love map. But first, let's lay the groundwork. So if you can, in the chat, please let me know what role you have in the adoption constellation, whether that's an adoptee, a birth or first parent, an adoptive parent, and so on. And that way I kind of get a sense of who's in the room with me today. Okay. So we're going to start with our primary objectives. Our primary objective, starting with our first one, is what I'm calling reflection and uncovering, excavating your truth. So when we take the word excavation, its literal meaning is to pull apart or remove the buried parts of something very carefully. Or another way is the act or process of digging up something. So what I would like for you to consider is what it would look like to excavate the deeply buried parts of yourselves. Our second step then will be decluttering, letting go of the unhelpful narratives that we more than likely have internalized over the span of our lives. And then our third step will be to intentionally reframe our thoughts to allow us to reorganize our attachment to self. And then when we do these 3 steps, we will then be able to create what I'm calling our very own love map. And this is what I found her is all about, a journey to uncover your authentic self and foster a deep sense of love and acceptance for who you are. So this quote, "Your story, your power." I believe this quote will set the tone for our time together. It reads, "Those who do not have power over the story that dominates their lives, power to retell it, to rethink it, deconstruct it, joke about it, and change it as times change, truly are powerless." I believe this quote by Salman Rushdie emphasizes the importance of personal narratives, especially for adoptees, in shaping our sense of self and identity. This quote suggests that by owning and understanding our stories, adoptees can reclaim their power and embark on a journey of self-discovery. So, I've got this question. It was stated earlier that I was a part of a podcast with my birth mom. And we did this podcast, we started in January of 2003. And so the first season of this podcast, you could say, was a form of excavating our own story, where we talked so much about all the things that took place before our reunion in our lives and then while being in reunion. But in the second season, we started to invite guests on the show. And we came up with this signature question that we would ask our guests at the end of each episode to kind of wrap up our time with them. And so here is where I would like for you guys to take a moment and jot down your thoughts to this question. What does "I found her" mean to you? And if you're comfortable with that, share it in the chat. So we'll take a moment, we'll breathe through this, and I'll have you guys answer the question, what does "I found her" mean to you? Okay, okay, very good. Mhm. Mhm. Okay, thank you for sharing. So with that, we kind of know that for many of us, it is finding our birth parents. It's also about finding one's cultural identity, finding oneself, finding acceptance and belonging, finding peace and resolution. Well, there was one particular adoptee that we interviewed. And when we asked her this question, I believe that she answered it in such a powerful way that I had to include it in our time today. So we'll listen here to our adoptee, Narissa, share her take on what does "I found her" mean.
So what does "I found her" mean to you?
Hmm. I think "I found her" means that I found, in a literal sense, I found her, my biological mother. In a non-literal sense, I found her, myself, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
found, yes, yes. I found a part of myself, like I said earlier, that was missing, that you can't really put into words. It's not a
Yes.
tangible thing. But when
Yes.
you find it, and you know that this is what was missing. So in finding
Amen.
her, I found myself.
Yeah, yeah. That still, every time I hear that, it kind of hits me in that certain part of the body because it's such a true statement, I believe, that she expressed. So let's now go back to the beginning of my story and let's start to excavate that. So what you're seeing here is a picture of a famous rap group, Run DMC. Let me know in the chat if you have some familiarity with their music and such. But the Run DMC, in the middle, in the red, is Daryl McDaniels. And he was considered a late discovery adoptee. And he produced a documentary that aired on MTV back in 2006. And when I saw this documentary, it completely shifted my perspective around the possibilities of maybe finding one's birth parents. I was 35 years old at this time when it came out, and I was also in grad school. And a year before that, I saw this movie, Antoine Fisher, as well, featuring Denzel Washington, and Derek Luke. Let me know also if you guys are familiar with Antoine Fisher in the chat, because I think that was a phenomenal movie, so much so that I remember specifically when we left the movie theater, I just was so overwhelmed in the parking lot, and I just couldn't actually stop crying for a bit. It was such like a visceral response, I think, to just the profound nature of being able to connect with one's birth family. So when you take that movie and then this documentary, which features for the first time that I'm learning that there is such a thing as an investigative genealogist. And this investigative genealogist is Pamela Slayton. And I decide to email her and just kind of poke around and see if it's all possible that this could be something I could do. And the thing is, I wasn't prepared for her maybe, her yes, if you will. When she responded to my email that there is a good chance that she could find her, I froze. I froze because the path to her wasn't likely and wasn't well liked. The truth is, I wasn't supposed to find her. And one of the primary reasons is because I was a closed adoption. And I also believe that I was supposed to just be thankful and grateful that I was found. But it was still a need though. And I believe it stems from this perspective that I am going to build out around a figurative house, but what is maybe more known by us adoptees as the primal wound. Although finding ourselves can be strongly linked to finding her, I would like to offer that finding her isn't our end goal, but rather the beginning to finding ourselves. It may be that when we learn about her, we finally get a better representation of ourselves. This love map gets to be more fully defined and understood. So yes, finding her did help me gain a better sense of my identity, but I also realized that there was still a larger part of me that needed to be discovered. So although I found her, I still needed to find myself in the overarching landscape of my life. So here is where I would like to suggest that similar to decluttering a physical house, we need to declutter our emotional house so that we can come to a more settled place within ourselves. We get to choose what emotions and thoughts we want to keep or toss. And when there is less stuff and matter to see and deal with, we will feel lighter and our perspectives will shift. We can learn to develop a greater appreciation for ourselves and be able to stand firm against all the various elements. I like to say that we can then experience living in a sound house when we find ourselves. Tell me in the chat, if you will, what comes up when you think about what living in a sound house might feel like for you. Yeah, having stability, secure, comfortable, sturdy. Yes, yes. Yes, definitely. Fewer emotional triggers. Yeah. Yes, without being judged. Okay, okay. So let's talk about Gottman. So I've been a Gottman trained therapist for several years, and I would see this house again and again each time that I met with a couple. And then recently this year, I started to extract a key principle from the theory and adapt it to the adoptee. In the Gottman method, they outlined 9 principles that make marriage work, which you can see here in this picture. For today, I want you to consider one very central principle from their theory, which is love maps. Love maps is the first layer of the sound relationship house in Dr. John Gottman's theory. Love maps, according to Gottman, refers to how well you know your partner. So when we apply this foundational principle to the adoptee, it can refer to how well we know ourselves. From knowledge springs fortitude to weather the storms in life. Gottman goes on to say that couples with detailed love maps of each other are far better prepared to cope with stressful events and conflict. Again, as an adoptee, when we have a detailed love map of our inner selves, we can manage the various stressful life events and manage conflict internally and externally far better. Let's go even deeper and look at what we know to make up a house: the foundation, the walls, and the roof. And wherever we live, there are elements, be it water, fire, snow, wind, that at certain times of the year usually increase our fear as to whether our physical house will be able to stand up against these elements. So the connection that I'm sharing here is much like we want our literal house to stand up against the elements. We also want and desire to have our figurative house, our emotional house, be able to stand up against the various elements in life. This is where I would like to propose that for the adoptee, our first layer, that love map, was removed from us, excavated at the moment of our relinquishment or separation from our first family. We know that a physical house needs a strong foundation upon which to stand. Otherwise, over time, that home's foundation will begin to be affected. The interior and exterior framework of that house will begin to show signs of shifting, moving, expanding, revealing cracks and structural damage. Therefore, I would like to submit that when an adoptee's foundation is removed, excavated, then the adoptee's sense of self is deeply impacted due to the loss of their original love map, our first parents, which includes our culture, our heritage, which have been severed or disrupted. And then we grow up on top soil that is foreign to us. Just as soil is fundamental to a physical house's foundation, our sense of self is rooted in our origins and heritage. So let's pause here and take a moment and think about what comes to mind when you reflect on this statement. And let me know your thoughts in the chat. Feeling alone. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Hard to thrive. Oh, yeah. Tree without roots. Ah, quicksand. Mm, okay, okay. So why a love map? The sound relationship house theory contributes to the concept of love maps for adoptees by suggesting that building a strong relationship with oneself is foundational to healthy relationships with others. For adoptees, this means developing a deep understanding of their own inner world, including their hopes, their dreams, fears, and experiences. And by creating a detailed love map of themselves, adoptees can foster self-awareness, navigate their emotions, build a strong foundation for self-love and acceptance. And here we have it again. Okay, so moving us along, I couldn't do this without bringing in the framework of the 7 core issues in adoption. In their book, Sharon Kaplan and Allison Maxon share how these 7 core issues are lifelong and intergenerational in scope. These core issues are present in all forms of permanency, to include infant and older child adoptions, kinship, guardianship, foster and step families, third-party reproduction, and in both open and closed adoptions. Understanding the 7 core issues in adoption is crucial when excavating your truth because they provide a framework for understanding the complex emotions and experiences that adoptees may face. These core issues that we see listed here, loss, rejection, shame and guilt, grief, identity, intimacy, and mastery and control, are often deeply intertwined with the adoption experience and can manifest in various ways throughout an adoptee's life. Understanding the 7 core issues in adoption can help adoptees excavate their truth by first providing a framework for self-reflection. Here we would see the 7 core issues, how they structure ways for the adoptee to examine their thoughts and their feelings and experiences related to adoption. And then second, it helps to identify and address the buried emotions such as grief, loss, or rejection. Third, it helps to challenge the unhelpful narratives by helping us to identify the internalized negative beliefs that we have about our adoption story. Fourth, it allows us to foster a sense of self-awareness in which adoptees can gain a deeper understanding of their own identity rather, and how their adoption experience has shaped them. And then it can help us to build a foundation for healing. And it helps adoptees work through these emotional wounds to develop healthier coping mechanisms and relationships. So all in all, by integrating these 7 core issues in adoption, we can empower adoptees to excavate their truth and lead them toward greater self-awareness, healing, and personal growth. And then we just can't forget the attachment theory, which explores how early experiences shape our relationships and emotional development. We know that it suggests that the bonds we form with caregivers in infancy create these internal working models that influence our attachment styles, which then go on to affect how we connect with others throughout their lives. Okay, so now we're here at a point where we have the basic framework. So I want to take a few minutes before we get started into a more interactive part and see if there might be any thoughts, any questions that may be coming up that you've jotted down and maybe wanting to share that at this point. So I want to give just a little bit of time here to see if there's anyone who may want to ask a question or just give their own thoughts on what we've talked about so far.
I mean, I can share one thought.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just excited about this idea you have about the love map being missing upon relinquishment or losing that. I just had never thought of it that way, so I'm excited to learn more.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I'm seeing in this chat about a question of how do you know your attachment style? And I do think there's great resources out there that actually allow us to take a quiz whereby we get to learn if we fall in what we call either the insecure area where there's maybe anxiety or what we call an anxious attachment style versus an avoidant or dismissive attachment style. The primary one is secure attachment. But yeah, I think if we could consider putting something out that would allow some of our guests to do their own attachment style quiz. This is something that I do with some of my clients, and it's a great talking point to kind of dig in and understand that a little bit more. Okay. Okay. So let's go in a little further. So we've got, as I said, we've got the excavation. We've got decluttering. We've got the reorganizing, and then we have the love map. So getting to what it means to excavate your truth and unearth the buried parts. What I would like you guys to gear yourself up for is we're going to talk about the excavating part. I'm going to share a little bit of what I was able to excavate. And then we're going to talk a little bit about decluttering. And then I'm going to kind of share a little bit about my decluttering. And then this is where I would want us to pause, and I will have our moderator to put us in some breakout rooms. So that way you guys can have a little bit of time to interact and share maybe something that came up while you listen to me share my story a little bit of what you need to unearth, if you will, and then what possibly could lead to being decluttered. And then after we kind of meet in that set, then we'll come back together, we'll kind of process, and then we'll move into the reorganizing part, and then eventually to what a love map could look like. So I have some questions, but I want to start by first giving you guys just a little bit of my story here. So one of the podcast episodes specifically that I did with my birth mom, we ended up calling it Intruders. And that name came out after we actually finished recording it, because what we realized is that each of us experienced being the other's intruder. I struggled using some of the language of the core issues. I struggled, of course, with this fear of secondary rejection, right? And I thought for sure, if I step into her life, I would be considered an intruder, someone invading, someone, taking up space. And what we ended up realizing as we unpacked our story together in that episode is she as well saw herself as an intruder in my life because she was told to not look for me. She was told to allow me to kind of go on, live my life, and that if she was to look for me, then she would be creating a disruption in my life. And so both of us recognized that we had a fear of rejection. We feared that each of us would somehow push the other person away. So that was one aspect of something that was very, very deep that had to kind of come up to the surface. And I think in talking with my birth mom, I realized that we had to go really deep for her because there were a lot of things that she suppressed, things that she didn't even recall until we talked in more detail about it. So I also believe that for birth parents as well, there is a form of excavating that they will be doing, that they can do as well as decluttering and reorganizing their own attachment. So I have a couple of questions that I'm going to put out to you guys, and I want you to take note of them because this will be part of what you can then share in the breakout room. So we've got this idea of reflecting on the concept of your love map being disrupted or excavated at the time of relinquishment. Another way is maybe to consider reflecting on how the separation from your birth parents and then the subsequent adoption process may have impacted your sense of self and ability to form close relationships. And then consider how then this experience might have shaped your understanding of love, belonging, and identity. So take a moment and kind of jot down some thoughts here. And then I'm going to share with you my next slide and see if we get a chuckle maybe here. And does anyone remember this movie, 27 Dresses? So when I saw this visual, I was like, okay, yeah. I mean, I remember very much that closet in the movie and just how cluttered, if you will, it was. And so I was able to, not because of this movie, but just in my writing and preparing, this quote came from me that I created. And it says, much like decluttering initially looks messy.
They all have ones. Yeah. Yeah, but I got, so I didn't have to have I could learn to be me with.
I'll take a moment and wait there. Thank you. Yeah. So much like decluttering initially looks messy, so does the messiness of my mind because I am attempting to reorganize my attachment to myself. So the thing that also was kind of in play for me with this whole decluttering is meeting her and recognizing that I felt that I was her intruder, and she thought that she would be mine. Again, kind of restating this, the narrative that I kind of developed growing up is, a sense of, am I worthy? Where do I belong? I felt this sense of rejection, right? I felt this sense of shame, and then immense grief and loss. And so those were kind of the narratives of that played out in my mind even before reunion, and then even while in reunion. And I will honestly admit too that wouldn't say I fully have recovered from these narratives. I still am working to declutter the messiness of my mind, if you will, and reorganize my attachment to self. So I have these prompts that I want to share with you guys next that you will consider as well in your time. So one of them could be, if we look at that quote and we want it to be in a reflective kind of headspace, we may think, well, this quote compares decluttering a physical space to reorganizing one's attachment style. So how does this resonate with your own experiences of personal growth or change? Have you ever felt messy while trying to improve your relationship with yourself? If we took an action-oriented approach, maybe you would think, if decluttering your mind is part of reorganizing your attachment to yourself, then what are some mental clutter items that you could let go of? What new thoughts or beliefs could you introduce to create a more positive and secure foundation? And then if we took an exploratory approach, this quote suggests that the process of reorganizing attachment can be challenging and uncomfortable. What fears or anxieties come up for you when you think about changing your relationship with yourself? How can you address these emotions with compassion and curiosity? So take a moment here and consider something that has been deeply buried and what narrative you have been telling yourself. And then I'm going to check in with my moderator on being able to have us assigned to breakout rooms so that the group that you're in, you can talk this through a little bit. And then my plan is we're at 4:26 to give you guys, I'm thinking we can set the timer for 15 minutes. And then when we do that, we can come back at the end and then we'll talk a little bit through before we move into the next part. Okay, I'm seeing that the rooms are ready to go. And so you can go ahead and open them.
Kathleen, when you're ready, you should see a prompt on your screen to join the room. Just when you're ready, no rush.
And do we need to see about Susan?
It's really funny. I've had a whole conversation with you and then realized I was muted.
I think we still have Susan hanging out.
We do. She might not be here still.
Oh, okay.
That's really funny. So can you see the breakout rooms?
I see a list and I see that there's 3.
There are 3.
Yeah.
If you go to more and breakout rooms, do you have the option to join them?
So I see a blue dot that says join. Is that what that would mean?
Maybe. Mine looks a little different. And also to let you know, I strategically placed people. They're not, by design, they're not the same size.
Okay.
And
Okay,
like one of
good.
them,
Thank
there's only
you.
3, and I'm
Yeah.
assuming Bill is somebody who identifies as male, but I don't really know that.
Yeah.
But that's why there's only 3 there. I thought, let's just leave them together.
Okay.
So, I mean, you do what you want. I didn't see how I can set a timer, so I will close them at
Oh,
4:40 or 4:45. What time do you want?
yeah. Let's see. I'm thinking, let me see. How many do we have? We
We have 3.
have 6. Yeah. I don't want, I'm thinking the 15 minutes
Okay.
isn't too long. You know, like I'm trying to make sure that it doesn't get to where there's a lull.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm
Well,
thanking
wait,
that.
let's look. So, okay, yeah, this is supposed to end at 5:15.
Mhm.
I just wanted to check that. What time is it now? 4:30. Okay, yeah, we've got plenty of time.
Okay.
Okay, well, I am not going to join a room. I'm going to sit out here in case somebody
Okay.
has a question or somebody joins.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe what I could do is, since I do see the join, is I can go in and just check in and make sure there's no questions.
Sure, sure.
Okay. And then when I hit join, does it have something that shows up to say to get out? That's the part I'm a little confused on is,
It's a great question. I don't know, but if you need to get out and you can't, you can always leave the call and rejoin. Oh, can you
okay.
though? No, well, you'll have to
No, I
rejoin.
don't think, yeah, I think that'll be a little bit. So I'll let it be and to avoid me messing anything up. I'll
All right.
just let it be. Yeah.
Oh, shoot, I'm going to stop recording for this.
Oh, that's right. You did mention that. Mhm.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. I think everyone is starting to come back in. Mhm. Mhm. Okay, do I have everyone back? I think I'm still seeing people pop in. Okay, good deal. Okay. I'm hoping that we had a pretty good discussion. Okay, I'm seeing good heads nodding. Yeah, okay. So maybe what we can do as I'm thinking about this is, because I'm seeing some of the head nods that this was a good discussion, I want to make sure that we have time at the end So then you guys can kind of give a fuller story of what your experience was. But good, okay, okay. So we got a chance to do some excavating and decluttering. And we did that in a small group opportunity so that you guys could really talk it out. And I think there's power in, right, being able, if we go back to the original quote, being able to talk out our story, to deconstruct it, right, to joke about it in such a way. So very good. So what you'll see now is the reorganize your attachment to self. So when we're reorganizing our attachment to ourselves, we're basically looking at how do we form new attachments and reframe past ones so that we can create a new and more shared narrative that is more complete and empowering. So putting your thoughts and beliefs in a new order. And this process then allows us to let go of the lingering feelings of loss, regret, resentment, and embracing a more hopeful and positive future. So for me, one of the things that came about as a form of reorganizing my attachment was, this reunion in many ways allowed me. And let me step back. I actually think that when I first reunited with my birth mom, because of kind of that whole perspective of fear of rejection, I know that we talked a lot about a lot of things, if you will, but I also remember that when we started the podcast, it was as though I was hearing some of her story again for the first time. And I likened that to the fact that I probably was in such an anxious brain at that stage of our, reunion, that although we may have unpacked quite a few things, it didn't settle in me, right? My emotions were still all over the place. And so when we got into this podcast format, I think I really got a chance to sit in the space with her and really talk about the story of us. And then it started to make more sense. So when I think about the reorganizing piece and being able to put my thoughts and beliefs in a new order, that I believe is when I was able to reframe my attachment, not only to her, but to myself. I was able to move from a space of distance and this sense of being an intruder to more active connection. And our journey of reunion then allowed us to build a relationship where we each had to learn how to reorganize our attachment to each other and our past experiences. So as we look at a possible way of what would reorganizing your attachment to self look like, we have this prompt that says, what's a new narrative that you would then like to be able to tell yourself? And how can you start incorporating it into your daily life? A second way of looking at that is, what's something based on this excavation process that will allow you to show up differently? So take a moment here and maybe share in the chat what comes up when you see these two ideas of reorganizing your attachment to yourself by, hey, I'm gonna start practically incorporating maybe this a little bit more into my daily life. I'm gonna practice showing up differently maybe in this space. And let me know your thoughts there. Okay, I'm going to move us to the love map. portion. Because I do want to make sure that I give us a window to be able to have an open discussion. And so I'm seeing a comment from Hannah, I'm going to be less scared of attachment and subsequent abandonment in theory. I mean, I'm gonna try, right? Yeah. Yeah. Very good, Kathleen. Yeah. Ah, I know what love is now. And I'm worthy of it. Yes. Okay. Okay. So let's dive in a little bit more with this perspective of the love map. So the idea of a love map, I will honestly say I'm still working on the graphic that I want to include in my journal. But this came up in a lot of my research and when I was, actually kind of like what visually could represent a love map. And so we're going to go with this for now. We're going to try this out. And so I think the idea of this tree, which if we look at the central image here, we've got a very vibrant tree that has these strong roots and branches reaching outwards, which I believe can symbolize growth, connection, and resilience. So when you think of your love map, I want you to consider these central points. You've got your core values. What might be 5 top values and ways to align this with your life? And this could look like, for me, I kind of noted resilience, and I liken it to the sturdy taproot anchoring the tree. One of my other values that I would say is connection and intertwining those roots between both my biological adoptive family as well as friends. And another root I would call out is identity. And so you've got your roots reaching into diverse cultural soils. And then growth could be the upward reaching roots and new shoots that are coming through. And then another thought of a core value would be authenticity. And here we see it in the tree's unique shape and vibrant colors. And then we could go into the trunk. So this could then represent strengths and accomplishments that shape our self-perception. And so empathy, maybe the idea is that I put a heart and carve that into the trunk. Or I look at the leaves and I draw on my creativity, my perseverance, being able to stand tall despite all the weathered areas. Another strength and accomplishment would be, my opportunity to graduate, to start counseling and to move into a private practice setting, as well as traveling. Those could be visually, those could hang on the branches of the tree. And then when we look at the support system, that would be actually the branches. So this could look like, right now for me would be my birth parents and also friends and how they provide shelter and comfort for me. The other thing that I would note as a support system would be my own therapist as well as a support group. Friends could be the smaller branches intertwined within the trees, as well as mentors that I could have. And then moving further in, we would look at the sunlight and the rain, and those could represent our self-care practices. For me, that could be the idea of journaling. So maybe I would place a book at the bottom of this tree, meditation. There could be the visual of me sitting at the tree with my book or journal and just kind of absorbing the sunlight. The other thing is just being still and looking at the beautiful nature around me. If I was to get even more creative with this love map, I could write some quotes. I could put them on stones and place them in different places around the tree's base. And then in addition to that, I could look at a path going outward from the tree that highlights some of my short and long-term goals, things that I am still working toward accomplishing. And one of those is definitely continuing to write and hopefully move that into a space where I am able to publish. So these are things that I see moving out from this tree. So when you think of your personal love map, I want you to consider what would be some of your values, your strengths, your support system, some of the self-care practices that you already have in place and could consider adding on. What are the things that you speak over yourself? And what are your goals and aspirations? What have you already seen yourself accomplish? And then what are you looking toward? So we're getting to the end of our presentation. And so this is where we're going to be able to kind of transition. I think we're hitting a really good time frame to be able to open this up for discussion. So I'm going to have us look at the kind of putting it all together, where we're looking at, again, the excavation process, which is the process of uncovering and exploring past experiences, memories, and emotions related to adoption. Our love maps, which is our framework for understanding ourselves to build a strong foundation for our emotional well-being. Being able to reframe narratives. This is a practice, I believe, that can be challenging, but when we do it, it is a transformative journey to be able to release a lot of the negative adoption narratives that we have. So then we're decluttering and we're organizing through this process and creating a more positive self-image. And then ultimately, we're creating our personal love map, which is our roadmap for self-love, acceptance, and personal growth. And so right on time, right about 5 o'clock. So why don't we take a moment here and have you guys either, if you're comfortable, unmuting and talking, or if you want to share some things in the chat, you're welcome to do that.